John, welcome to the Basketball Podcast.
Chris, now I'm really grateful for you having me here and honored to be here with you.
Strength in Numbers, an encyclopedia of authentic coaching wisdom. We'll dive into the book a little bit, but maybe, John, just start with a little bit of where the book came from. Where was it born?
Yeah. So if people are familiar with Tim Ferriss, he's got a book called Tribe of Mentors. And basically in the introduction to his book, he's talking about how he had these 12 questions he was trying to figure out for himself. And he's I'm gonna make this easier and I'm gonna just send these questions to top people in the world, business people, coaches, actors, all types of top people. And he got all their answers back and put into a book. So that's his book, Tribe of Mentors. And I'd read that book before, and then I was rereading the intros. He talked about that process, and I was just like, hey, I should do this for strength and conditioning coaches and do this. But then I was like, no, it should be for all types of coaches, strength coaches from all sports, different levels, basketball coaches, football, volleyball, soccer, everything. And then even like leadership coaches and get these different lenses and perspectives for these questions. So I came up with my own set of questions and started just reaching out to different coaches. And when I had the idea, it was like, I'll put together a PDF or something and send it to some friends. Didn't know it'd really be coming to something, but as more people like yourself started responding and sending in their answers, it was like, wow, this is really cool what they're sending in. It's impacting me and my perspective. I want to do this right and put it together into an actual book because of what so many people were giving to it and wanted to really make it something special. And it always been a goal of mine to do a book. I never really thought I would actually do a book. So it was easier to get everybody else's thoughts and put it together in a book and then just put it together. But that was the idea. So that was September 2023 and just worked on getting all these awesome insights from so many different coaches and put it together. Yeah, finish it up in this past December.
Great stuff. And coaches, I encourage you to check it out and .com if you want to go there slash book. You'll see some of the questions that inspired it. And that's great as well that we can go there and check it out. But in terms of this podcast, John, let's get into some of the practical takeaways and some of the ideas that we can share with coaches and the importance of pouring into others through your overflow. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, when we think about coaching, it's a very service oriented industry, right? We're trying to serve the athletes, serve the people around us, right? And that is the goal. That's a huge part of why so many of us, I think, do it is to help others. But I think one thing so many coaches talked about, and I've seen in my life too, is you can't give what you don't have. If you've got nothing to give, it's hard to serve people in the way that they deserve. Like Phil Beckner, I think you've had him on your podcast, but he talked about it where he said you want to pour from your overflow, right? And I think as coaches, when we learn that we can actually provide a higher service to other people when we do invest in our health, in ourself, in our development, I mean, it's not selfish to do that. It's actually in the goal of providing a greater service and being able to give more to the people we work with. And I think that's like sometimes I think just as coaches, it is pushed to right. And I know for myself, I'm going to prioritize serving my athletes. And if I have to put that over everything and let these other things slip for the rest of my life, I'm going to do that because that's the main thing. But I think it's just having this shift. And then a lot of coaches in the book talked about having that shift where you go through these cycles of getting burned out or all these other things. And that makes things slip when you're coaching. That makes you not as good a coach. So I think finding that rhythm for yourself where we are still giving so much to others, but it's because we have so much to give because of how we've taken care and invested in ourselves as people and coaches too.
It shines through in the book too, like how much these coaches have given to others and how much they've
Hmm.
received from others
Yeah.
as well. And that is such a beautiful part of the coaching process. And I know another big part of the process for this book and for you and for me and all these other coaches is mentorship and the value of that. And I
Yeah.
think you talk about it even more specifically about this idea of having a personal board of directors. Can you
Yeah.
talk to us about that?
Yeah. And I think if there's like one big theme of the book, I think that is mentorship, right? Because I think coaching is a apprenticeship, mentorship based model and profession. And there was a number of coaches in it, especially when the question where, okay, who are the people you go to for advice in your life or career? And they talked about how they have this, some people call it different things, but there's a board of advisors, board of directors. Rod Olson talked about having a Mount Rushmore of four people you can go to. But some of them talk about like having different people for different areas of your life, whether it's more professional based, more personal or family or spiritual, financial, these different areas where you might have a great mentor, but maybe they aren't the best person to mentor or advise you in a certain area of your life. So some people, I think, intentionally place people on their board of directors for these different areas and intentionally build that out. While I think some people, maybe it happened unintentionally and came into place where they found these different mentors for these different areas. But I think it's something interesting to think about. It's something I've been thinking about and asking other coaches if they have. They're just okay, looking at people you do have in your life and what areas do you go to them for? And then seeing, do I have a lot of people for this one area, but not really anybody for this other area? And how can I maybe seek out or intentionally try and place somebody in that area so that I'm covering all these different buckets that we need mentorship or guidance or go to for advice. And just having these people we can go to that have been through those things, those questions, those problems that we need to, and we can go to and rely on. And we have all those buckets covered now through that board.
Any advice specifically towards, let's say, a coach wants to find a mentor or some mentors or people on their board of directors in terms of seeking them out
Yeah.
specifically?
Yeah, I think, one of the other questions talked about like who are the best mentors to go or to seek in the world. And I think one important thing is not chasing the logo or not chasing the name, because I think we might think, okay, the bigger the school or the bigger the organization, like the better person. But one of the key things, like a lot of people echo this, is you have to find somebody that's going to invest back in you and be willing to invest in that relationship to mentor you, because it's a two-way street, right? Where you have to be willing to be mentored and put everything into that, but you also have to have someone that's willing to mentor you, because it's an investment, right? To mentor somebody of time and effort, and in finding that person, it's not always going to be the person with the big logo. I know for me, my first mentor working at Abilene Christian mid-major, right, that's not a huge logo everybody's seeking out, but I was able to be with him and he poured into me. And I think another big part of it, as we're thinking about mentors, is like, where are you going to be with somebody that gives you opportunities for growth, and opportunities for responsibility, as opposed to maybe you got to the biggest school or biggest organization, but you're just there and like a passive participant rather than actually being part of the process and getting to the opportunity to earn responsibility. So having the mentors that believe in you to give you that and let you earn that, I think is huge, rather than just having someone that's has people to be there, be like an intern and not really get to do anything. So I think as you seek it out, it's like not who is going to look the best on a resume, but who is going to actually pour into me the most and be willing to have my back. And then also with that, it's like, how do I align who I'm seeking out with my goals and who I want to be as a coach, right? Because we have different personalities, different styles of coaching, and maybe there's different things we want to learn as a coach. Like, how can I find the best people at those things or in that style and align that fits, right? Because I think just maybe like a player with a coach, that fit matters with playing style. I think the same thing matters if you're trying to develop yourself as a coach, with who you're trying to become as a coach and matching that up to who you're seeking to help develop you in that.
You talk a lot in the book, going hand in hand with what you just talked about, understanding jobs and future possibilities and current
Hmm.
realities and all these different things, which I
Yeah.
know is such a huge part of coaches. And I think generally, if I get together with a group of coaches and we're not talking technical, tactical, we're talking about
Yeah.
the job, everything around the part that we love, which is coaching and basketball. So talk to us about that, what you learned about that from all these coaches.
Hmm. Yeah, I think one thing that kind of stuck out that a number of people mentioned is, I think it was like career periodization, was like the different way you're thinking about choosing a job or leaving or taking a job based on where you're at in your career and your life. Where a number of coaches talked about, like early on in my career, I'm gonna I'm taking jobs to try and climb the ladder of success, rise up in the ranks, right? You're gonna move more of that. But now they're like, okay, now literally every decision is based on my family, right? Maybe the school's in the area. Do I want to move my family again? How is the location for my kids? And thinking about that. So I think one, understanding like where you are in your life and how that impacts how you're going to make decisions, But then one really impactful theme, I think that's a really good framework for helping people practically make these decisions is a lot of coaches talked about this framework called the 4 Ps, or one person called the 6 Ps. And I'm going to pull a quote from it actually real quick from the book. But you think about it as if there's 4 Ps, and you think about, okay, pay, progression, personal life, and purpose as 4 categories. And this is a quote from Scott Kuhn. He's with LSU football, but he says, if you've got all 4 of those, then you're in the dream job and you should never leave. If you got 3 out of 4, then you're only going to leave for the dream job of 4 out of 4. And if you got 2 out of 4, you're actively looking. And then anything less than 2 out of 4, like, what are you doing there? So I think that, like, it's really simple framework, but just being able to, okay, I'm going to rank these, maybe as we think about career prioritization. Okay, if I'm with a family, maybe I'm doing it with my spouse, we're going to rank these of where we see our family, and just be able to use those as a framework to see where, if I should be looking, if I should be staying. Because I think sometimes you can get caught up with, oh, I want to get to the next thing, like the greener pastures. But maybe you look at it, hey, I'm actually really good 3 out of 4 or 4 out of 4. Like, I shouldn't be looking, like, just because I feel like it's time to look. So that's something that I think simple but really beneficial to just use as a framework for coaches thinking about that.
Yeah, that sounds great. The 4 Ps, that definitely helps put some things into context for those that are
Yeah.
thinking about jobs and future possibilities and all those stuff. I love that. And then just this clarity and clear expectations that constantly shines through from successful coaches, how
Hmm.
whatever it is about their coaching, but there's this
Yeah.
clarity and these expectations. So talk to us about that.
Yeah. I think that was one of the biggest things that stood out when coaches talked about, okay, you just took a job. What are my first steps when I get to this new role or position? And so many of the coaches talked about, you have to find clarity with, okay, if we're, for me, the strength coach, why is that head coach hiring me, or assistant coach? Or if you're the head coach, like, why is administration hiring me? You need to establish that clarity of, like, how do I actually provide value in that role? Because I think a lot of times there's a lack of clarity across athletics, whether it's clarity between coach and player, head coach and staff, whether it is. And so if I'm a strength coach and I do a great job of preparing my team to be fast and get up and down and transition and be really well conditioned to do that, but then my head coach, his style is to be super physical, slow the game down, dominate the paint, dominate the boards. Like, I might have done a great job preparing for another system, but in terms of what the head coach expects and values, like, I didn't fit that expectation with what I need in that situation. So I think across the board, finding that clarity is huge. And then I also think, like, going the other direction, if you're the head coach or the boss, a lot of times it's easy to think people have clarity with what you're expecting of them. Maybe tell them something that you think, okay, they know what I want. But I think I've seen a lot personally where maybe the head coach wants the assistant to do something, and they spend all this time trying to figure out what the head coach actually wants them to do, and want to make the head coach happier, not upset. And rather than, okay, the head coach and them are on the same page and have a lot of clarity, and now they can actually spend that time on trying to do a great job in whatever that expectation is. So I think just across the board, just really getting together and making sure there is actual clarity on what's expected, what's needed to provide value, and how people can do that just makes it so much easier to do the work, and just execute rather than trying to figure out what I actually need to execute on.
It's a fascinating, like when you were talking about that, I've been around a lot of more corporate world people over the last
Hmm.
year, and just hearing how many of them, when they first started their job, didn't know what their roles were, what
Yeah.
their expectations were, what they're even doing there.
Yeah.
And it's like
Yeah.
having that great mentor, having that person that immediately, maybe it seems a little hard on you or a little more specific, but outlining those expectations and that clarity helped them so much. And
No
others
doubt.
felt a little rudderless. So I love that you're talking about this because I think this applies to our players, it applies to our staff,
Hmm.
and the different things that come with it. And another thing that's shone through in the book is prioritizing an athlete's mental state. Can you talk to us about all how the different coaches approach that part of it?
Yeah, that was the biggest point that was talked about was when athletes, like, how are we responding when one of our athletes is injured? And so many coaches talked about how much of an importance has to be on that mental state as much as that physical recovery during that, especially if we're talking about a longer term injury. And I think we all know that it can affect them mentally, but I think sometimes not on purpose, just not realize it as much of how much it impacts it. And I think one thing that sometimes shines through though is like as coaches, when maybe we get an injury, like one of the coaches, Zach Zillner, he's the women's basketball strength coach at Texas. He talks about like when he tore his Achilles, he's like, man, this is like the end of the world. Everything's over. But he's like, wait, okay, like hopefully I'm a little more mature than when I was in college. And like I'm acting like this is in the world. Imagine how my athletes feel when they have a long-term injury. And this is actually like how they pay the bills, right? How they're getting a scholarship or how as a professional they're paying the bills for their family. Think about how much that is actually impacting them mentally and stress wise. So I think just really realizing how much we have to pay attention to that. And I think it's really common where coaches do really prioritize that initially. Let's say someone maybe had an ACL tear and they had surgery and the whole team's going to visit them in the hospital and the coaches and we're going to really take care of them for a little bit. But I think it's really natural as time goes by to drift away from that, especially if it's eight months or whatever. We're not going to maybe naturally show them that care unless we're intentional about that. And sometimes I've seen and talked to other people where that athlete just drifts away from the team and kind of isolates through that as people just it's not new anymore. So I think there has to be a real intentionality with not letting them drift away. And some coaches talked about certain things with Tim Doyes, the head VC volleyball coach. He talked about he had a girl with ACL tear, and they started like a letter writing chain throughout the team. So different people were writing letters at different times throughout the year. So they were always intentionally being with that girl. And then Eric Drew, he's an assistant women's basketball coach at Texas Tech, and he talks about where he had like a whole calendar where different people on the staff at different points in the calendar, okay, this is when you're going to check up with this girl, so that they actually have it planned out where they're going to have all these different touch points. And I think also even like finding different roles for those athletes is huge. Where one thing I've found really powerful is, okay, if you can't play, like, okay, you're going to help me lead the game day warm up with the team, and I'm going to give you this responsibility. Because a lot of times on game day, it's maybe you go sit out or on the bench and like clap. You're just like separate from the team, but trying to involve them with that. Or coaches have talked about, okay, maybe you're going to help coach like your position group or take stats or something. And I think given a little autonomy there, like I don't want to force someone to do something if they're going to be embarrassed and maybe don't want to do it. So have that conversations, but I found a lot of athletes really value kind of being in those roles to feel a part of the team and feel like they're providing value. So I think like finding different ways there where we're just not letting them isolate and be on their own and that they're providing value to the team still is really huge.
Such a great point about staying connected with those athletes that we tend to, in that moment, we're all there. And then after the fact,
Yeah.
not as much. So I love that. And that applies obviously to a lot of your players within your program in different
Yeah.
times. So stress, it's a part of coaching. Talk to
Yeah.
us about what you learned about how some of these great coaches, effective coaches, long-term successful coaches have managed stress. I know you burn out, these different things that you get into.
Yeah, I think so. I'll talk about one of my favorite kind of frameworks. One coach has Dan John. He talks about he's a kind of legendary strength coach, but he talks about how he has this pirate map and basically like a pirate map, do all these things, find the treasure. But he's basically like, what are the things that he needs to live a long life? Because his goal is to be able to dance at his daughter's wedding. He wants to be healthy to do that. So he has these kind of five things. He's gonna eat vegetables every day. He's gonna walk, work out, all these different things. And what he found for himself, or what he finds for himself, is if he's feeling all this stress, all this anxiety or whatever, he tries to check back into his power map and it's okay, what are the things that are going to help me feel less stress? And it's okay, it's all these things that he has on his pirate map. And he's okay, why am I not doing all those things? Because I'm stressed and all this. So it's like this symbiotic relationship where we're not doing the things that are going to help us be less stressed because we're stressed. But then I think it becomes about, okay, whether you call it a pirate map or any other type of list or different type of clarity, like things that are going to help us get back to who we want to be, getting back to those things, right? And making sure whether it's a list we have, we're putting it up so we can get back to it and figuring out what are the things that fit us to get us back to who we need to be. And I think it goes back to even the pouring from your overflow, right? When we get so caught up in serving or doing all the things we have to do as coaches and we get away from all the things to pour into ourselves, then we're just running on empty. So establishing what are the non-negotiables that I have to do. So many coaches talked about different things, whether it's reading or running or breath work or these different things. Exercise is huge. I think finding those things for you and not allowing them to slip in the name of serving the other people, because in terms of having longevity for ourselves, we have to do those things to allow ourselves to have longevity in serving and not just burn out and flame out in the short term.
It makes sense. And in some ways, coaching the job has become easier with technology. In other ways, it means there's always more that you can do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this is such a part of it. And what I liked is Rod Olson, I think it was, that was identifying things from, I think he calls them yellow flags.
Yep.
Can you talk
Yep.
to us a little bit about that process of identifying these things? Because that's probably one of the most important things. We don't realize sometimes what is actually stressing us.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that would definitely be a huge section. I'd definitely recommend to people. He's got some great stuff in this section. But yeah, he talks about those yellow flags of identifying what are the behaviors that start to show up in ourselves when we get to those stress points. Like maybe like I just like I think he talks about he just starts cutting people off and not getting like just trying to solve other people's problems, and like he doesn't want to hear them complain or whatever. And I think that's huge. Like having that self reflection of trying to see who do I start to become, is the Snickers bar, like you're not you and you're hungry or whatever. Who is that other person we start to become when we get away from doing the things we need to do, and just starting to identify that. So then, okay, when we start to see those things, I start to see those behaviors in myself. Okay, that's that yellow flag. Okay, now I need to check in with myself. Maybe now I need to get back to those things. And I think that's really huge. Is just I think so often as coaches, like we talk about, like we're doing so many things now. Technology, there's just so many things constantly bombarded us that we sometimes don't ever have any time with just our thoughts or our own reflection. We're always just in the cycle of go or be with other people, coach other people, do these other things, and then get back to the family or whatever. But I think it's important to create that intentional time where we can be with our thoughts and our own reflection, and start to really see those things, whether it is like what are the yellow flags or different aspects, whether it's even just reflecting on coaching and how we're doing that, just actually having that intentional time to understand and articulate the things in our own mind.
I had a lot of success early on as a young coach. And I know that
Mhm.
comes up in the book too. And I had a really good mentor that I'm so grateful for that told me I'm not actually going to start to develop to the level I want to as a coach until I have struggles. And it was just
Mhm.
like placement in a good team to start with. And everything seemed easy, right? In a
Yeah.
sense, even though you know it's not, if you're really
Yeah.
aware. So talk to us about that process of I think it was one of your coaches said that they felt sorry for coaches that had too much success early.
Yeah. Yeah. That was I love that one. That was Tony Holler, really great track coach. He talked about he was a high school basketball coach, and he was like, I think he said he's 28 and 90 in his first 5 years. And he's like, I'm sorry. I feel sorry for coaches that have success, because that turns me into a lifelong learner of trying to find better answers because of that. And I think I just think one of the cool things about the book is there's so many of these coaches that are at the very highest level of their profession and domain. And so many of them talked about those struggles and failures they had. And I think, like you're saying, as like a young coach, okay, young coach, I'm looking at these people in the book, like they're doing it, they're winning championships, they're working with MVPs, like they haven't made, like they are where I want to be, like they probably don't ever mess up anymore. But I think it is so cool seeing so many of these coaches talk about, okay, these are the mistakes I made and still made, or the personal struggles I still have. Because I think then it helps with, okay, as young coaches, we don't have to internalize that or feel shame or hit to our ego because we're messing up. Like it's not like an unfortunate part of being a coach. It's a huge part of actually getting better. Like we have just with our players, like we need to, push that challenge skill balance where we're gonna fail sometimes to actually get better. If we're doing the same thing over and over, like we're never gonna get better. I think it's the same thing maybe if we're just always having success, we might not actually reflect on what needs to be improved as much as, okay, we are losing and we are having failures at different points. Like what do we need to do to grow from this? So I think it's like most of us at least are not going to win every game, go undefeated every year. And I think it's just important to understand that is going to be part of coaching, but it is a needed part of coaching to be the best that we can be.
Beautiful to be able to also see coaches reflect on the commonalities of their athletes. Because I think when you get this broad spectrum of coaches together, certainly we can all talk about coaching, but obviously they've been
Hmm.
exposed to a lot of successful athletes and understanding kind of the commonalities that help them. Can you shed
Yeah.
some light on that for all of us?
Yeah, I think so. The reason, so that question that I asked about what are the commonalities from the best athletes you've ever coached in your career? The reason I asked that question in the book was because when I was at Oral Roberts, our athletic director brought in Bill Beswick, who's a pretty renowned sports psychologist, and he did a series of meetings with our whole athletic staff. And one of the things he talked about, he was like, whenever I talk to these great coaches, and we talk about, okay, what do you desire in athletes, or like what are those traits of your great athletes? The things they always list aren't so much the technical, tactical, physical. They list more so the psychological makeups or the character skills type aspects. And so I wanted to ask that question, see what came up. And I think obviously those other three aspects, you get, especially the higher level, you got to have them. Right. But so many coaches talked about the makeups of who the athletes were, the psychological aspects, the character skills, the habits, the mindsets, all that. And I think not that it's more important than those other three aspects, but I just think that aspect, I think the reason so many coaches talk about it is because of the influence of the other three, right? The influence of how they develop the other three because of what they're made up of. And I really do think development is a skill. And I even think about it now as like, okay, you got athletes that either like push versus pull to potential, where some of them are on their own. They've got great ability to develop themselves. They're going to push past their potential, past maybe looking at them from a physical standpoint of what we think they could be, the walk on that becomes a great player, whatever. And then there's those athletes that you feel like you got to pull and drag them to get anywhere close to their potential. And I think that's because of that makeup. And I think it's easy to get caught up in the other stuff. So if we're looking at recruiting or drafting, what they could be. But I think it is important to look at development as a skill based on who those people are at an even higher level. And also the consistency of how often those other three, the technical, tactical, physical, actually show up. Right? Because I love the quote from Fergus Conley. He's in the book from one of his books actually. He talks about having this conversation with the Navy SEAL and selecting people to the Navy SEALs, and the commander talked about, it's like, I don't want the guy that's going to give me 3 out of 10 one day, 10 out of 10 the next day, and then 5 out of 10 the next day. Like I'd rather take the guy that gets me 8 out of 10, 8 out of 10, 8 to 10, because what's he going to give me the next day? Or 8 out of 10. Like we know what we're going to get. I mean, I think sometimes it's the same with athletes that have that maybe great potential where like you see this flash and it's that 10 out of 10 and it's wow, like in a way it can be like addicting. I'm almost going to be done with it, but then you see that 10 out of 10 and it's just like beautiful and like, all right, that pulls me back in for more. But then it's like the next day it's a 3 out of 10 and you don't really know what you're going to get. Whereas I think just with that, the athletes, these coaches are talking about with that, the mindsets and the psychological makeups at the highest level, like they know what they're going to get. And that allows for a consistency in production, but also consistency in development, where over time, like they're just going to continue to rise and rise compared to those others where it's just up and down. You don't really know what's going to happen.
Makes sense. And it connects obviously to your philosophy, the book's philosophy, which is this overriding belief in a holistic approach to
Hmm.
coaching. And it really does shine through in the book. All these coaches talk in some way about that. Other thing it emphasizes, this book emphasizes the power of community and teamwork. So maybe talk about how can coaches foster a sense of community with their team, especially in an environment where individual performance is often heavily emphasized, like it is. You've been part of basketball and many other
Hmm.
sports. The individual matters, but we still want to foster this community.
Yeah, I think it's hard, like, especially like I've been in college basketball where with the way it's shifting with transport and NIL, I think it has become more of that individual focus. But I think like with some of the top teams, like they're the ones who are able to bring those individuals together. And I think sometimes with that, it's like, how can we align individual needs or individual wants and desires with the goal of the team, right? So we're not making it like an opposition where it's like you have to just put aside like whatever you want or whatever your goals are as an individual, but and put it against what the team wants. But now it's like, how can we meld those together where what's best for the team is best for you as an individual? Working with maybe these college athletes that want to, if they want to get drafted, they want to have a great professional career and earn money through that. Like, it's okay, buying into the team and the community aspect of that. It's like people, like organizations want to draft people that win. Like they don't want to draft, they're not going to be as willing to draft unless they're super talented. Someone like they didn't make the tournament, they're on a really average, below average team. Like the better a team can do and make a big run, like the more everybody on the team is going to eat at the same time. So I think that's just a small example, but like finding ways, how can we align that ultimate vision of the team with the vision of the individual and just make it where there's not separation or like fighting or friction between those two goals.
Makes sense in terms of that. And another part that kind of shines through from the book is the importance of collaboration, not
Hmm.
just you being on the performance side, obviously the importance of that, but the collaborative part of it that, sure, sometimes the head coach is the focal point, but the really good ones know how to collaborate.
I think I think that's one of the biggest things in terms of like if we look at just like player development, like if there's silos within that, there's not gonna we're not gonna be maximizing that development for an athlete. For me as like the strength coach, like my best friends were gonna be the director of player development or the assistants doing the development, like because we needed to have complete alignment between that. And then I think also the alignment with the head coach in terms of like how our practice is aligning with what we're doing in the weight room and just aligning like how are we aligning the logistics and the schedule of everything and then working with player development or the assistants. How is the outcomes or adaptations we're looking to get on certain days aligning together? If I'm doing super high intensity stuff in the weight room and we're getting after it, and then okay, the next day is going to be easy in the weight room, but then we're going to do super intense stuff in our play development. And it's they're always at this high peak and they're never getting a chance to come down from it. Like, how can we align that where maybe, okay, we're looking at what we're trying to do from themes in the weight room and we're going to match that up. That's what I would do with my player development people. We're like, okay, Mondays, this is our aim and our goals with the weight room and our maybe our sprints, jumps, and then we're gonna match maybe those intensities based off how we're setting up the spacing or the speeds or the different constraints of okay, if maybe we want to limit it, we're gonna not we're trying to work pick and roll stuff. We're not gonna let the bigs get a full run. That we're gonna constrain that in some aspect or constrain the space that they're moving in and just try and match the physical adaptations and the physical stresses really to have kind of those peaks and valleys throughout the week so that both the weight room, the player development stuff, and then practice is all working and aligning together and going in the same direction for that player. Where a lot of times I think, everybody does their own thing and maybe it's great on their own, but it's a bad, like a meal. If you put three great individual ingredients together, but they don't fit at all, it's going to taste really bad. So I think it's the same thing with development. Like we've got to get all those three things working and fitting together to do the best for the athlete.
And yet at the same time allow for individual freedom as well, which is a
Yep.
big part of it as well, that
Yep.
balancing of those things. And for me, another area was this, and probably the part that I approached it from when you asked me a question was this idea of like continuously learning and adapting as a coach and
Hmm.
how the best coaches are able to do that. They're not stuck in one way. I did this 20 years ago and it worked then, it's going to work now, and discounting the fact that our education, our understanding of learning, teaching, coaching, whatever it is, has evolved. So talk to us about that, the value of adapting and evolving.
I think I think as we go back to we talked about the failure aspect and learning from that. And I think the best coaches and like you talking about in there and then so many other of these that are like the very top, they are they are not afraid to change their opinion if they're given different evidence that it's wrong. Right. I think when you get so entrenched in an idea or, a certain way of doing things, and you're not open to other stuff, like that's when you're really going to be in trouble. And the best ones I've ever around, Darby Rich, the one who wrote the forward, so he's the strength coach for men's basketball at Texas, and he's been doing it in college basketball as long as anybody. When we worked together, he was always asking me, who was way less experienced than him, but asking me like, okay, what are your thoughts? What are your ideas? And he was not afraid to change things or do things. And I think that is a hallmark of people that have longevity in success in coaching, because things are always going to be changing, and there's always going to be somebody progressing in some way. So if you think just, okay, this worked and I'm going to stick with it, even if it did work great for that team, like you're going to have a completely different set of individuals to coach year to year, and they're going to need something different year to year. So even from that aspect, it's always got to be evolving of how can I find, based off what I know and what I'm learning, that can best fit this situation in this specific time and place.
You pulled the curtain back on some insights into some programs that I think as coaches we all want some insights from, which is
Hmm.
also a cool part of the book. And particularly fascinating to me will be reading more and learning more about South Carolina women's basketball from Molly
Hmm.
Benetti's perspective,
Yeah.
who's their strength and conditioning coach. But can you share some insights from their program, which has been obviously elite for so long?
Yeah, I think she talked about that. And even I asked how, like, from your perspective, like, how have y'all been able to be so elite for this period of time? And she really, what we just talked about how Coach Staley is going to find what each individual needs and how to approach each individual. And I think I know Molly does a great job of that too, of providing that autonomy and providing just through the relationships he has of like how she can best fit what they're doing to each individual. And she talked about like, hey, some people think we just get the best, all the best recruits, and obviously they do get really high level recruits there. But she talked about in it like a great example of their ability to develop and find how to get the most out of each athlete. Like the past year when they won national championship, like they had a whole new team, whole new starting five coming in, but they're still able to have that sustained success. And I think knowing her and hearing how the staff as a whole works, I think that's part of what we've talked about with the always trying to evolve and find the better way and find how they can help that individual team and those individuals maximize their development, maximize their potential in that program. And it's not just, okay, this is what we've done to win national championship and go to multiple straight Final Fours, and we're going to do the same thing. It's okay. We're able to maximize each year, and then that's why they can keep being there, because they're gonna have great players every year, but different players every year. So I think that's one of the huge things. And I think she also talked about, just like we talked about before, just the collaboration that the whole staff has of how they work together, with still, like you said, having that individual freedom within the staff and autonomy of staff to do what they know to do, but they're also aligned and fit in terms of the goal they're working towards together and collaborating on that.
Anson Dorrance probably is the other one that stood out to me.
Yeah.
That anytime I can read anything from Anson Dorrance, I'm
Yeah.
in. Anytime I can listen to him, I'm in. And that's pretty cool that he contributed to this book. What was your
Mhm.
takeaway from him?
He he had so many the amount of wins and success and impact he's had as a coach is just incredible. And we had a long Zoom in. There's a large section for him with so many takeaways. But I think I just think what's so cool about him and reading other books and pies from it is his emphasis on the character skills aspect of his athletes and the emphasis on impacting the people in his program. And I think sometimes there can be a perception that they're like, we can either choose to like focus on character in our people or focus on championships, and it's like one of the other. But obviously he shows like it's not one or the other, because he's got 21 national championships, so obviously he's done okay winning wise. But like one powerful thing he talks about is, and in their end of year banquet, like their highest award is a character award, right? It's not the MVP, it's not that, and that's the highest MC's placed, and he's got some pretty incredible insights on just developing leaders and his competitive cauldron where they're ranking everything and how they create that competitive aspect. And his insights on mentorship are pretty cool too, of how Dean Smith mentored him when he was there in North Carolina, and then Roy Williams and all this. But he's just got so much wisdom and experience through his time of coaching that just, I was really unmatched. Like it's pretty incredible to read just how much he shared and the knowledge he has.
Very cool, for sure. And to a certain extent, some things that are said by coaches are said differently, different phrasing, different wording, which is always important to hear sometimes how people say things. But going deeper, I'm wondering what was something that surprised you that you had never heard before, or that was like really cool. I've never thought of it that way, because definitely there are some things in the book that would do that for me as well.
Yeah. I mean, this is like the first thing that popped in my head, and this isn't something in terms of thinking I would never go the way, but one thing that was surprising or interesting was when people talked about like a pivotal early job in their career, there was I think it had to be like 30, at least 30 or 40 coaches listed a job that didn't have anything to do with coaching, whether it was waiting table or different jobs that were seemingly unrelated to coaching in any way. But I think they helped develop the skills that translated into coaching in different ways. So that was just one thing that was surprising that when I asked that question, I wasn't expecting to hear from coaches.
Conscious coaching with Brett Bartholomew.
Mhm.
Tremendous work, a resource for all of us as coaches. What was a
Yeah.
takeaway from him?
Yeah, I think one thing one thing he a theme through a couple of his questions was like, okay, this answer to this question is going to be very context specific. And I think one when it talks about like mentors and how we talked about the board of directors earlier, he talks about, I think, and then it was like diversify, like you've got to find those different mentors for different things and based on who you are. So echoing what we talked about earlier, but I think that was one really thing that really stood out from him was needing that diversification in who we're going to and how we're learning from different people.
Of course, not just an author, John. You are a performance coach and heavily involved, obviously, in different levels of athlete development. Curious from your perspective, there's tons of coaches at all levels of basketball here that listen to this podcast. What are some trends? What are some things that you're focusing on now within kind of player development, holistic player development, that can provide some insights for all of us or blueprints for all of us?
Yeah, I think so. I've been working in college basketball for a while, and now in this past May stepped over into running my own business, and now I work with still some college pro, but mostly middle school and high school. A lot of basketball players there, but I think even with college and with those high school, middle school, like I think it's so much on creating those foundations of movement, and sometimes there's a rush to get to things or get to fancy things, but I think basic things and consistency with that is going to be the thing that matters so much, especially even with okay middle school, high schools I'm with, even throughout basketball season, even throughout going into AAU, where there's always basketball. Still having that through that is huge in terms of both increasing obviously performance, but also just the durability and longevity of their basketball careers, right? As the volume of basketball has gone up for the younger and younger athletes. I've been seeing it in college when we get recruits, and some of them they're coming in with these injuries that, like I saw about with Darby, where he's been doing it forever. I used to never see these with college athletes, but now sometimes they're already coming in just because they played so much basketball and maybe not had any of the strength side or any of that. So I think even with the volume, it's like prioritizing, okay, even if we can keep at least through the heavy parts 2 times of physical development throughout that, I think makes a huge difference. And we don't have to do anything fancy or crazy. One thing I find a lot of value with basketball players is using a lot of tempo. So like eccentrics, controlled lowering down, or isometrics, pausing and holding there. I think that helps promote a lot of health. And with these basketball players, it limits the load a little bit. So we're not trying to max out. Like we're trying to strengthen specific positions and tendons and muscles. And we don't have to do that through these huge loads. We can do it. We get strong there through different ways and progress in different ways, but just having that consistency throughout there, especially with the younger athletes, like they're gonna really progress with it without needing anything fancy or special, but just the okay, we're gonna show up and do every day. We're not gonna take these breaks, right? Because when when you take okay, we're gonna do it for a couple of weeks, and then we got all this stuff going on. We're out for 3 or 4 weeks, and we get back 2 weeks. There's got to be a level of consistency with it to actually reap the rewards of it. So even if it's not crazy, just having that continued dedication to it and commitment to it, I think is the biggest thing, especially for these young athletes.
Definitely, especially mentioning the volume part of it. It's
Yeah.
amazing how busy young athletes can be nowadays with all
Yeah.
the different events and demands on their time. I love that idea of building the foundation for them and
Hmm.
helping them understand, again, as we said, future possibilities about what
Yeah.
they can do as they get more time. You mentioned periodizing your career a little bit in terms of one of the coaches mentioning that. And
Yeah.
same process for you when you start to work with a new athlete. Are you helping them periodize a little bit of their schedule? Like it goes beyond just they show up and they work out with you. You're helping them understand the whole holistic approach to their week, their day, their months.
Yeah. Yeah, we definitely with each individual kind of talking about that and first for me figuring it okay, based on whatever time of year, like when are you practicing? When do you have tournaments? When are you doing going to skill development? And how can one first I align what I'm doing with that? And then how can maybe talk about it if it is okay, we're going 7 days a week, there's never any break like how can we maybe fit in okay maybe we're getting a day where it's maybe you just get shots up on your own a little bit but you're not having anything organized or finding a day of rest and then just trying to find ways to push to align that and it is especially I think it's easier in college where it's you got full structure and control over everything within the organization for the most part but now with working with these younger kids, working with the parents, but they got all these different things going on, and there's a lot going on. But I think it is important to, as much as we can, okay, let's try and align that and fit that together. Where I think with these younger athletes, they do have they can recover faster than and as the older you get, it gets a little harder. But I think these young athletes can recover faster. But I still think we have to push for better ways to do it and not just overload them all the time because I think that in the name of like keeping up and trying to keep up with all the other kids or whatever or chase the scholarship, sometimes that just actually makes you not get better, right? Where more is not always better, right? Better is better. So how can we try and find that right amount for each kid? And it's going to be different for every kid, right? Of what they need, but it's having those conversations, running different experiments. Let's try this, try that and seeing how they feel and what works and continue like we talked about with coaches of just always learning but just with each individual athlete how can we continue to learn what's going to be best for you through what we're doing and then seeing the results of it.
It's awesome to talk to you, John. You're building a community. You're building strength
Yeah.
in numbers. I know that was your goal, and the
Yeah.
name of the book speaks to that as well. So, just talk to us about the book and kind of what's happened since you've released it and all the different things that have come from it.
Yeah, no, it's been really cool to see the response of it with release December 10th, a little over 6 weeks now. I think about like almost 300 have been sold. So it's been cool to see messages of people and how it's been resonating with them. And it's cool to get messages too where some coaches are like, hey, I got this and I got a copy for our GAs also. Because I think it's great for everybody, especially coaches starting out. It can really help let them see a lot of paths and a lot of guidance and really like a form of a guidebook of mentorship, right? As we talked about the importance of that. So just seeing the impact it's had on some coaches and right, less not always about the X's and O's, but just on their career and who they are and how they're thinking about things has been really cool. And I'm just excited to see how it can impact people because right, that was really the goal. Like when I first started, like I said, it might just be a PDF or whatever. I don't know, it would be like now that it's a book, like how it could just hopefully change the direction of somebody's career or life or how they view and approach coaching through all the stuff we've talked about through here. That would make it all worth it of doing it. Just one person just had an impact there.
Love it, and I super appreciate you sharing the game with us here, John. And thanks, and best of luck with the book and everything else to come for you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being a part of it.